We had a cyber attack, unfortunately, that started in August of 2023, and we ran the company on paper for 5 months and couldn't pay our suppliers for a good portion of that. That's when you learn about how important your relationships are.
You have to be 10,000 times more careful when you're thinking about payments to suppliers.
But when you're down for literally weeks and then months, it's a whole different story. And so
you were at Clorox for almost 33 years.
yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like, how did you make the decision that, okay, now is the right time for me to actually step away from the business, pass it to another generation, and focus on the other things in your world? Why at that moment? Why not later? Why not earlier?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had in my mind that I wanted to go at least 4 years in the role. I think the company would have probably preferred if I'd gone, 5 or 6 and through the SAP transition, but a number of things that the company changed. My role changed a little bit. There was a new operating model. I
Yep.
was very familiar with how that operating model worked, and I just thought it was probably time for somebody else to give it a run and put their energy and their passion and their expertise against it. And I also had other things that I was interested in doing, and more, there were itches I wanted to scratch that I just couldn't justify scratching at Clorox, and in conversations like this with, great guys like you, getting on stage and keynoting or having a panel conversation. I was doing some mentoring, but not as much as I really wanted to. And so, stepping away from honestly, and you know this, at these levels, you're on 24/7, pretty much 365. And getting to step away from the grind freed up some time for me to do some other things.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine. I agree. I agree. And to be honest, in many ways, I mean, yes, I'm a leader of our business, but our business is smaller. It's not Clorox, so you're dealing with a lot more fires to put out, and it's sort of funny if you got 1,000 employees or something. That means that a 1 in 100% chance something happens every day. So there's always something going on. I'm kind of curious, like, also a little bit about your trajectory within Clorox, because you originally weren't in the supply chain side or procurement side. Originally, you were, as I understand it, in the manufacturing side of the business. So I'm kind of curious how you came to that and how you made the transition to supply chain, and how much of your world was really procurement versus the broader supply chain universe.
Right, right. Well, I'll take you back a little bit farther. So when I graduated from Georgia Tech, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had worked a few summer jobs, a golf course, a metal fabricating plant, McDonald's for a little bit, and I liked the metal fab plant the best because it was like immediate results. There was this whole, I didn't know it was called efficiency at the time, but like this clock inside me ticking around how much could we do and how fast could we do it. And the very best offer that I got was to work for Frito-Lay, and
Mhm.
so I started there. I was in 5 different manufacturing plants, salty snack manufacturing, over 10 years, and I just learned so much, and I have so much of my career and leadership trajectory, uh, based on what I learned at Frito. It's just a great incubator for supervisory and leadership skills. And about the 3rd or 4th time Clorox called, I picked up the phone because some things were happening at Frito, and I thought, "Well, that was probably the right time if I'm gonna do something." And I liked the people I talked with. It was a much smaller company at the time, Spencer. Today, I think
Ye
the company is 7.1 billion. At the time, it was 1.7.
Okay.
So the inverse, and it was only a US company. It was very paternalistically run, I think I would use that word. Just a little bit larger family. Plants were not very big. And they were looking for some more supply chain, more business sophistication. So they were hiring marketing people from Procter. They were hiring, the Frito-Lay people of the world to come in on the supply chain side. And so I was in manufacturing for the first 5 years, ran a plant in Los Angeles for 3 of those. And then the very next job I had, one of the biggest responsibilities was procurement for Kingsford charcoal. It was about a $400 million business at the time. I think I had 70 or $80 million underspend. And that was back when strategic sourcing was kind of gaining a lot of altitude, and the company piloted 3 pilots. One of them I volunteered for. It was only a $13 million spend, but we were able to save $4 million. We're
Wow.
sourcing some new materials, and we ended up, helping the company put a claim on the bag based on this new technology we developed, whereby we supersaturated sawdust, got that to mix into the charcoal briquette and created a lot of great smelling smoke for the cooking experience. So that was kind of my first foray into procurement. At the end of things at Clorox, $4 billion of spend under management through my CPO, Ava Cho, and global responsibility, 6,000 to 9,000 people in the company were in the supply chain, and procurement became a huge part of my world, especially as we went through COVID and hyperinflation. And then, we had a cyber attack, unfortunately, that started in August of 2023. And
Wow.
we had paper for 5 months and couldn't pay our suppliers for a good portion of that. And
Wow.
that's when you learn about how important your relationships are, how important
Yes.
how important the way we treated your suppliers over time. They stuck right with us. They kept producing, they kept shipping. We were able to keep producing, and
That's great.
eventually we worked ourselves out of the cyber event.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a remarkable situation. I mean, I'm kinda curious, like, how did those conversations go? Like, how did they notify you that because I'm sure that somebody found out first, but how did they notify you? How did you then think through, like, it's sort of like a, war room, this situation, and then how did you approach the suppliers? I mean, did you have the category managers do it, or did you step in as a leader and say, "Hey, look, like, this is a real pain. This can be a real painful period for them. Like, I wanna show face myself as the executive and do sort of exec to exec conversations." I just love to hear how that process went.
You're just kinda shocked. And
Yeah.
then your mind immediately goes to, "Okay, if I have no systems access, what are we going to do?" We have just changed operating models and moved some manufacturing and planning responsibilities over to general managers. And,
Okay.
GMs are really good at a lot of things, but most of them didn't grow up as supply chain people. And so we agreed that we would revert all those responsibilities and capabilities back to me and my team for all decision making. We needed one place to make decisions, not 12 BUs at the time. And, so we immediately dug in on our business continuity plans. I said a couple things right away. I said, first of all, because there was a push to close down our factories and not run them because we didn't have any systems. I said, absolutely not. We're going to run our plants. We're going to maintain inventory manually. And because as soon as we were able to ship product, we couldn't ship for the first couple days. We hadn't had that. We didn't have that figured out. As soon as we're able to ship product, there's going to be some latency to the demand, and we're gonna wish we'd run as hard as we could run during that time period. And I said, if you're running manufacturing plants and you need to go get outside warehousing, go do that. And so we
Mhm.
did some of that. We kept our plants running. We kept building inventory. That turned out to be a really good decision because
Mhm.
the demand was still there. We still had to fill.
Yeah.
We just worked our way through our BCPs. We found out quickly that were a lot of them that were really well written and really well done. There were some of them that weren't necessarily as good as they could have been, and so we had to just adapt and adjust on the fly. Sometimes that happens. We had great response from our retail customers. Every single one of them wanted to know what they could do to help. Several sat in
Really?
the room with us virtually, like, day after day, certainly week after week, and help kinda plan through how we could get them as much product as we could get them as soon as we could get it to them. Suppliers were great. You asked the question, how those communications go. They were surprisingly smooth.
Okay.
I think in almost every case, it was handled somewhere in our procurement group. I think at one point in time, we sent a letter. I sent a letter to all of our key suppliers, strategic suppliers. Is just, look, here's what's happening. As much as we could tell them because we didn't know everything at the time, but as much as we could tell them, and we asked them to hang in there with us and trust us, and 100% they did that. They kept us running, so there's kind of a mutual benefit there. Even places where supply was constrained, they still maintained our access to that supply. So it was really a fabulous show of support from the supplier community and also the retailer community.
It's great. I mean, I'm kinda curious, like, how in a business of physical goods, things like payment terms are so hotly contested because there's cash flow conversion, you're taking things on your balance sheet, you're physically handling something. How were you able to handle the conversations about the payments and, how long were suppliers not getting paid for? Was this like, because I have my own story that I'm happy to share, but I wanna hear how it was for you guys.
Yeah. I think in some cases we were 100 days in without making a payment.
Okay.
Some of our suppliers were absolutely cash businesses, and, I'm thinking specifically about the charcoal industry and what we call hog fuel, but it's basically wood scrap and sawdust and that sort of thing. That is a cash business, and if you're not able to pay, they can't afford to deliver to you for free, and so that material is gonna go someplace else. So, there were some suppliers that we knew are, more tied to a cash cycle where, we found a way with limited resources to, cut some checks and move some money. But for the vast majority of our other suppliers, we asked them to hold. And, again, I would just say in terms of payment terms, there was just a lot of grace given between our retail customers, the Walmart, Targets, Home Depot, Costco's of the world, Kroger, Publix. Also with our supplier community, just a lot of grace given. And, I take it back to this relationship that we built over time, the trust we had in each other, the belief we had in each other. And, we just went on like that. And I don't know that I'd ever anticipated what it would be like if we got in that situation. It was a
Yeah.
tremendous relief to see it occur that way.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense. It's funny because when I was at Tesla, we were ramping the Model 3. We did not have issue with a hack or a system outage, but our ramp was slower than we would forecasted in EDI. And in automotive, you have a big penalty for suppliers if they don't ship. But we didn't have a penalty if we reduced our EDI. Like, hey, we're going to be at 5,000 vehicles per week in 3 months. Surprise, it's actually 2,000 vehicles per week. And so the suppliers, they'd staffed up, assuming that that was credible demand, and they had a bunch of temp labor that they had brought in. And so then it became a balancing act of how can we do like release the valve strategically with the right suppliers, because some suppliers were like, hey, if we don't get, please accept more parts than the new EDI says, because that's just what we need to survive. And if that was credible, then what we would do is we'd accept them, but then we would run out of inventory space. And so we had at one point during the Model 3 ramp, tractor trailers, like truck trailers, just full of parts that we couldn't put into our warehouse that were just sitting in the Tesla parking lot where employees usually parked. So there's some crazy stories about the early days in Tesla. You mentioned something called a BCP, and if I'm not mistaken, that's a business continuity plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's one of our 10,000 supply chain well business acronyms. Yes, business continuity plans. And, the thing about that is we were diligent about writing down the workflows and writing down the processes and actually practiced in some cases what would happen if we ever had to implement them. The tricky part, and when I talk to people about their cyber attack, because I think it is a case of when it's going to occur, not if it will occur. Nobody contemplates having to activate all of their BCPs at the same time, and that's essentially what we did. Nor do they contemplate it happening for an extended time period. Most of us think, well, we'll be down for 6 hours, we'll be down for 12 hours, we'll be down for a day and a half, and that's endurable in a lot of different ways. But when you're down for literally weeks and then months, it's a whole different story. And so that's the practice regimen that I think a lot of us have to go through to make sure we are ready when that occurs.
Yeah. And what's typically inside of a business continuity plan, and like, where are they stored? How much work goes into them? How do you validate that they're right in advance? And then how quickly how much shelf decay is there? Like, is a business continuity plan from, 10 years ago still valid when you dust it off and say, oh, shoot, we have to put this into action?
Yeah. Last question first. It depends. If your customers have changed requirements, then obviously some of your OTC business continuity plans are going to change. If you or your key suppliers, all the way from tier one, tier two, tier three on the procurement side, right on through to your transportation partners, and somebody has changed technology in a significant manner, that part of the business plan has to be rewritten and rethought. Inside of
Right.
those business plans it's basically a catalog of the workflows for that process. And, so it's everything from the first step to the last step and all in between, written up by your subject matter experts and others who are part of that process. And, when you write them and then practice them, the practice actually tells you whether what you wrote has a good chance of working if you have to put the thing into play. But the real trick is making sure that the subject matter experts are right in the middle of the early organizing and documentation of those workflows. how things work, who does what to who, when do they do them, what's the timing. Because in many cases, you're trying to replace digital assets with human, with human effort. It's the decoder ring to translate whatever that process was using your digital capabilities to just pure, pure human activity.
Mhm. No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, it is really interesting. It's actually sort of funny. There was a hack of my university this morning. So I got this crazy email from I can actually even share my screen. I mean, it's just coming through. It's like a we got hacked and I got sent, you know, 3 emails and I don't want to show you the email because it's graphic, but like pen hack, it's yeah, the Daily Pennsylvanian. It was basically a security breach that got sent to effectively every alumni, and it's just now this is big news. I mean, this is as of about an hour ago. I just got all these emails, so it's really topical. It's crazy that this stuff is happening, and it's funny because I think one of our first conversations was about Georgia Tech because our CTO, my co-founder Don, my business partner, is a tech alum as well. So there's a lot of connections there.
Well, the attacks are getting much more sophisticated, all the way from the personal ones that show up as a text message or something in your inbox to, they used to be really clunky, bad syntax, poor grammar, misspelled words, graphics that just didn't look quite right. But now they've got a lot better, a lot more sophisticated. It's a real challenge for individuals and enterprises to keep up.
Yeah. How have you had this issue before where, with Supplier, because I feel like so somebody tricks me into giving them $100 gift card, that happens in our business. Every time a new person joins Lightsource without fail, they get an email to their inbox that says, "What's your cell? This is Spencer." And then sometimes people don't check. And then they give them the cell phone, then they get a text on this random number and it says, "Hey, can you do me a favor, buy some Apple gift cards as a gift for the team." And then I had this situation, sometimes people catch it, sometimes people don't, they bought the gift cards. Uh, One time a guy said, "Hey, I'm gonna be late to the team meeting. I'm running your special favor." I was like, "I don't like the sound of this. I don't remember. Like, can you remind me of what favor you're talking about?" And like the gift cards, right? I was like, "Stop what you're doing like right now. This is totally not me." And now we have to tell people, it's like funny, like they onboard in all things in Lightsource, and then I have to also onboard them onto this idea that, hey, by the way, I don't need gift cards from anything. Like, if I'm gonna need gift cards, I'll do it myself, you know? But it is really interesting. But $100 Apple gift card, way different than, potentially like $1 million transaction as part of a normal buying process from a business. So, I mean, how you have to be 10,000 times more careful when you're thinking about payments to suppliers. I mean, has that ever been an issue that's come up? Have you had fraud risks and things like that when suppliers provide, or someone pretending to be the supplier provides, banking info or banking info updates? Has that come across your desk?
Yeah, it has, it has. There were a couple that happened fairly recently. I think there might be some litigation around one of them, so I'm not gonna speak in, but, I think the trick for all of us is, as enterprise leaders, it's the preparation, it's the awareness, it's the sense of urgency that you wanna imbue on the members of your team that this is real and it's legitimate. The impersonating the CEO or the CFO or some other executive for gift cards is it's a well-known ruse, but it still trips people up. And yeah, it might only be $100 this time or $1,000 next time, but that lack of attentiveness to your company's cybersecurity by every single member of the company. This is not just an IT thing. This is anybody who's got an email address, anybody who's got a mobile phone with a company number or access to company systems. Even in our plants we did an audit of our plants looking at all the SCADA systems. The ways that you can activate or get into any piece of equipment. And, we found more vulnerabilities than we thought we had. Now, none of those ever got activated, but, you gotta shore up all those things because you never know where the next threat's gonna come from.
No, it makes a lot of sense. My hope is that the scary thing for me is that AI is getting so good with voice recognition. I had a friend of mine, she posted on Instagram saying that she was like, "I have to tell people about this," because it was like someone had impersonated her mom's voice, calling her from her phone. her mom's phone saying like, "Oh, I need a payment for something," and she posted on Instagram saying, "Hey, look, even I'm like a well-educated, thoughtful person. I'd gotten all these trainings as part of my work. I was so close to being tricked on this. I just need everyone to know." And so my hope is that technology, though, can be used not just to create the false, the nefarious activities, but also be used to catch them too. I mean, it's sort of like an arms race, right? They can get better at cyber attacks. Maybe we can get better at cybersecurity, and
Yeah.
so maybe if we transition over to the world of technology. One thing that's been really interesting to see since you transition out of Clorox is you've been advising several sort of next generation SaaS and AI companies, and a few that obviously I love our conversations. A few like KetQ and Pop Capacity and Verisen AI. So I'm just kind of curious, how's it been, advising these kinds of companies? Has it been fun? What's the experience been? What have you learned? What do you feel like you've been able to teach?
Can I come back to that? I'll tell you just a real quick story
Yes,
as our
yes,
AI and
yes.
impersonation. And this is
Yes,
my
please.
stepdaughter, who's a third year at Alabama. Sunday afternoon, my wife and I get a text from her where she goes, I just woke up from a nap. She's in a 5-bedroom, multi-story townhome. Doesn't always lock her door. And she said, I just woke up from a nap and this guy is sitting at the end of my bed. And she sent us a picture of her room with a mirror, her dresser, and this guy. And she goes, I think he's homeless. I've seen him in the area before. What do I do? And her mom is freaking out, texting as fast as her thumbs will go. Get out of there, get out of there, get out of there. Yell for help. She came back. Nobody's home. I'm picking up the phone, getting ready to call Tuscaloosa 911.
Yeah, of
And then
course.
all of a sudden, there's this huge laughing emoji coming back. She says, never mind. This is AI. It's not real. You did that to us. To your point, it was so realistic and lifelike. And she just put a few words to it. We had no way to verify it. And we're like,
Yes.
we're going crazy.
Yeah.
Well, to your point about how realistic it is, and maybe the arms race will allow their defenders to catch up. I hope so.
That's an
Oh my
insane
god.
story, Rick. I mean, that's by the way, that's like that would give that would give me a heart attack. You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't be a joke. That would be a medical bill. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah.
my goodness. Now, I thought where you were going with that story, by the way, was that it was someone who was trying to scam you guys. And that would have been I mean, that story's crazy. One step crazier would have been if they somehow used a photo from her Instagram or Facebook and the modified it, spoofed the number, sent it to you, said, "Hey, he needs like, can you, send him a Venmo or Cash App for $100? He says he'll leave." Like that would be, one step even crazier.
You can imagine that's probably happening right now. That wasn't the case here, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was something else. You asked the question about the founders and CEOs of supply chain technology companies I'm advising, and it's been such an interesting, 15, 18 months. I've learned a lot. I think I've contributed a good bit. But what I love about it is the sort of in every case, the intelligence of these individuals, the capability they're building that is deriving real benefit for their customers, their features and benefits are creating significant value. And as a customer of some of these companies, you don't have to be like leveraged by this massive ERP. These are great standalone single point solutions. And I think a lot of people are moving to that sort of best in breed thinking versus, let me buy every single suite of, your favorite ERP, name one of them. I find a lot more people are responsive to these easier to install, easier to connect with, shorter time to value, shorter time to implementation solutions. And that's the thing that I've really been trying to help emphasize with these companies, not only the pitch and the message and the clarity of that, but also the time to value. If you're sitting in the chair I was sitting in for a number of years, I'm always looking for solutions that bring me extraordinary value. And the faster I can get to those, it sounds kind of simple, but in a lot of cases, like, well, how long does it take to connect? I don't, 9 months, 12 months. Well, that's just massively too long. It needs to be, weeks, if not a month or two for the integration. That's something that all these companies are bringing to the party. And I just find it really energizing to talk with them about their solutions and how they're going about kind of improving upon what they've already built.
Hmm. It makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of curious, was there ever a time in when you're in the sea where you thought about, hey, I see an opportunity for myself that like, I need to find someone who's, strong at coding, but like we would use this. I'd be the first customer. I know 15 others. Did that thought ever cross your mind?
Yeah, I don't think quite that way. I was always a better consumer of the tech and understanding
Yeah.
how the dots connected to solve problems I had. That was really the vast majority of my focus. And I think you and I have talked before. Clorox had such a technology debt. So many basic things that were, just didn't work right or were really legacy systems or legacy capabilities
Yeah.
had to be fixed. I didn't really have time to think about like sort of that very leading, like your capability at Lightsource. I didn't have time to think about that necessarily. There were just a lot of other things to attend to.
No, it makes a ton of sense. Well, I guess my question then, following up on this would be, is there something today that you are wishing somebody would build, but you're not seeing? Oh, there you go. You got the product placement even in
Oh,
the
yeah.
cup. Yeah.
I'll
That's
get the
great.
Lightsource I'll have to get the Lightsource cup.
You know what? I think did Megan end up sending you gear? I think we
She
had
did.
a whole
She did,
she
yeah.
did?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
fantastic.
great,
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
Was it a good care package? I should have double
Oh, it was
checked to make
awesome.
sure she would send you high quality stuff. Okay, good.
Yeah. I've, uh,
Good.
I've I've already had it on out and about, and it looks great. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I take great pride in I take an irrational amount of pride in our gear, and I source these hats myself. So, and I'm really specific. You know, people say, "Oh, we can do these hats or whatever." I'm like, "Nope, it has to be this exact model, sandwich brim, the whole nine. I want metal hardware. I want structure. I don't want a trucker hat." So,
Right, right.
I've got strong views on it. But yeah, I'm kind of curious. Anything that you wish was being built, but you've not seen yet, and or you're not sure if it's being built.
There are probably a couple of things, and both in the procurement space. One is, as a manufacturer, sometimes it's really hard to get past your tier 1 supplier to understand who their 2 and 3 and maybe 4 is.
Yeah.
Not so much for negotiating leverage, although I guess that's a possibility, but in this world of sustainability and regulatory
Mhm.
compliance and making sure you're compliant with, child labor laws in the US and so on and so forth. It just you need to have more visibility to those transactions and who those actors are. I guess that kind of goes along with the second part, which is just the veracity of a supplier's claims about the source of their materials, where that raw material, packaging material is coming from. Are they conflict materials? Countries where business should not be being pursued. All those things can be a little bit difficult to understand at the right level, and at the moment, there's some pressure on that, but not as much as I think there will be in the coming years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the struggle with the tier twos is that the tier ones don't often want to share that information because of the concern that it could be used for negotiating leverage or getting, nobody wants to share their pricing. They just want to tell you about the cost, but not the price. And so, and I think that the challenge for me is I wonder, like, is technology the solution? Because if people aren't doing that today manually, they're not getting that visibility today manually, will technology be able to get there? And so when you've interacted with suppliers and asked them, hey, we want tier two visibility, what have been the challenges in doing that prior to the idea of having technology take a look?
Yeah, I think there could be a technology solve. I think it's just as simple as, "Hey, you don't need to worry about that, we'll worry about that. We're gonna handle our business and you handle yours." There's been a little bit of a separation there, that arm's length that they wanted to ensure remains. And, I think over time, as maybe manufacturers get more pressure for retailers to be able to
Right.
produce definitive clarity in that space, that will trickle through the rest of the supply chain and past the tier 1s.
Interesting. And is that coming from the retailer perspective as a customer that wants to advertise sustainability to their end consumer, or is it more like regulatory government requirements?
Well, it depends where you're operating. So if you and I were
Mhm.
sitting in Europe right now, it would be a much more regulatory compliance. You're compelled to provide a lot more information, a lot more clarity around your sourcing activities and so forth. Here in the US, I think it turns into more of a retail selling story or a brand selling story about the sustainability of the product. And to be able to say those things legitimately, you need to
Yep.
be able to back them. You got to be able to back those claims up, or at least you should be able to do that.
Should be able to do that, right? I guess the question is always, like, to what degree are people willing to pay for sustainability? I don't I can't I actually don't know the answer to this question, but I will say that I very rarely in our customer base see times where people are quoting out multiple suppliers and are saying, "Hey, we're gonna go with a higher cost supplier for other reasons beyond performance of the supplier."
I can think of 0.0 times when I am aware that that's happened. Uh, I mean, honestly, you ask people if they're interested in sustainability and reducing waste and reducing, items that go to a landfill, everybody goes, "Yep, check that box, absolutely." And then the next question, "Are you willing to pay a little bit more for that?" "Absolutely not."
Absolutely not, yeah.
I just keynoted a conference with Millennium Alliance in Munich, and it was great, and I was on, I had the keynote, but then they also asked me to, moderate a panel the next morning, and on the panel, we actually came to this topic. And I really didn't know what the conversation was going to be, but one of the gentlemen there was from Kraft Heinz Europe, and he said exactly what you just said and I said. People want sustainability, they're not willing to pay for it. And even in a market where sustainability is a more sophisticated construct and there's a lot more regulatory behind sustainability efforts, they're still not willing to pay for it until there's some collaboration between industry, regulators, government, and, waste removal companies, we're gonna have a really tough time. There's a lot of material. Aggregating it, capturing it, making it a cost effective to reprocess it and put it into a condition where a manufacturer could use it. That's just that doesn't happen to a great extent.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. I mean, there are some rare examples where there is an alignment between economics and sustainability, and I was talking to somebody, who leads the sustainability practice at Rockwell Automation, and she was telling me that one product area that they have is, not just build new automation systems, they will also take the old ones from themselves and from other competitors, and they have a whole remanufacturing, business line, and so that was one example of probably many where it's like, "Okay, interesting." So there is a circular economy aspect. It's
Right.
cheaper because you're reusing if you can repair and reuse, and also there's the environmental impact and waste is more significant. I mean, less significant. The other example I can think of is Tesla itself, right? I mean, nobody, to my knowledge, bought a Tesla because it was purely because it was more environmentally friendly. I mean, they buy it because it's a great car, and that was our goal is, like, can we build the best possible car? And then if it just happens to be, better for the environment, that's a good thing to do, and our mission was to transition the world to sustainable energy, or rather accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. But the Nissan Leaf existed previously, sustainability-focused vehicle, no sales, right? And so you have to make it cool, and then you start to think, well, actually, if you were to look at a first principles basis today, and we were to like, let's say we were to design a car from the ground up today with the knowledge we have now, but imagining that cars never existed, it would be we would never build an internal combustion engine. That would be so silly. It'd be like, so you're telling me that we're going to harvest, dinosaur bones, we're going to refine it, then we're going to explode it like 8,000 times a minute in order to move forward. We can't just use a battery and an electric motor.
Right.
And you'd be like, no, the explosions, that's what we want. And so you'd never design an internal combustion engine today. So I think it was just sort of a better car. And it just so happens that coat the dog pills with peanut butter, and people feel like they're eating candy, but they're getting vegetables, For a lot of things, that's not the case. And so I wonder, like, and the other challenge is that it's like, we live in a capitalist society, and if one company says, "Hey, we're going to be virtuous and we're going to do something that's more expensive for us," and another company doesn't, is the company that goes for cost, first and foremost, are they going to be in an unfair competitive advantage? Is there a disincentive to actually do the right thing on this area? And so when I go down this line of thinking, that's where I get to the place where I think maybe it's not the individual's responsibility. Maybe this is a governmental responsibility, because they have to create an even playing field. I don't want the folks that are focusing on sustainability to be at a disadvantage to the folks who are not. So why not just say, hey, look, here's the regulatory requirement, or here's like a universal tax on carbon or something. It gets very political, but take it away from the individual to make that decision, or feel compelled to make that decision, you know? But
Yeah.
I'm curious if any of this is ringing true to you or any of this is sort of triggering you on some other thoughts.
Well, where it takes me is the Clorox brand Burt's Bees. 95 to 99% all natural, verifiable. And the target shopper for that product absolutely loves it. What it made me think about was how well do these manufacturers and brand owners know their customers, and
Right.
how can they appeal to their sensibilities around a sustainability aspect without having to have it regulated in, if you know what I mean? It's like, are the marketers being influential enough? Is there enough thought going into the product design so that waste is being minimized? One idea that I think has never really kind of taken hold the way it could have is refills.
Mm,
Walk down your home care aisle and look at all the full bottles of something or other. Clorox is the share leader there, and we've tried refills. Reckitt's tried refills. I think Unilever I mean, everybody's tried refills, and the consumer just won't go for it. And why is that? It's not that much more difficult. It's an obvious reuse of a very functional container that you bought originally, but yet it's not. And so, like, how do we solve those kinds of challenges where there's already a pretty obvious solution that the marketing group hasn't been able to convince the shopper that this is something important to them? I don't know why that is, but I do know that's a challenge that we have, and I think it's something that we could take on. And could there be more? I don't know. I'm never a fan of necessarily more regulation, but I think some collaboration between, as I said before, regulators, waste removal companies, manufacturers, and consumer. Like, we got a note from our refuse removal company when we lived in our house, and they said, "Hey, stop separating glass. We're no longer collecting or recycling glass." Easiest things to recycle and reduce to a material that could be
yeah.
consumed in the manufacturing process. And there wasn't any incentive. There was no money in it. And they're like, "Yeah, don't bother. We're not doing it. So don't worry about
Wow. I've
it."
heard this before. I've heard that a lot of times, even here in San Francisco, people have told me that the recycling separation very often is just to make you feel good, but actually that it gets mixed back together. And I'm like, I really hope that's not the case. But my other hope is that if it is separated, eventually the technology will catch up to solve it. Like, like with electric cars, there was always this complaint that people would have. People will be really smart about it. They'd say, "Oh, but think about in the Tesla, we have, we have mining that goes into materials, and then we have the coal is being used to power so much of the grid, so it's actually not an electric car, it's a coal-fired car, and that was, like, for 10 years, like, the way people thought about it. But look, if you don't transition over to having something that can consume electricity, then when you are able to move the grid more towards solar and more toward nuclear, you actually have the ability to do it. So
Yeah.
I think that it's okay if even the system's not perfect. Like, I would like to continue separating my recycling under the hope that one day they actually find better ways to mitigate it. And what's been amazing is I don't know if you followed the journey of JB Straubel. He's the chief technology officer, former CTO from Tesla, started a company called Redwood Materials, and what they're doing is they're taking the rare earth metals and lithium and nickel out of spent electric vehicle battery packs for uh, re-refining material and then re-putting them into new vehicles. Because not like the cobalt like evaporates; it's still in there. It's just it needs to be remanufactured chemically. And so, I think there are a lot more circular opportunities. But I do think the idea of refills is very interesting. Have you seen the companies that do like powderized soaps and powderized tablets where you throw them in water to reduce the amount of logistics? You're not shipping heavy liquids that wait out.
Yeah, I have. And in fact, a new opportunity, and this is in cosmetics. My wife showed this to me. Women are using face cleaners all the time, depending on how much
Yeah.
makeup, maybe. So she's got this one little pack, and it literally is a dehydrated square it looks like a piece of gauze.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of perforation. You put it in your hand, you add water, it immediately dissolves into kind of a sudsy, soapy,
Yeah.
oleate type, and you rub it. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's I don't know how many of them there are in one pack, but it weighs about 4 ounces, so, it's super light to ship, but really effective, single use, and dissolves and, goes right into the main wastewater treatment stream. So, I think there are a lot of places where more more good innovation and more good thinking is sort of.
Yeah, I feel like that's a place where you could, I mean, coming from your cachet and experience in the CPG space from Clorox, you could probably have a pretty lasting impact on that. If you could find the right folks to back who are doing something with returnable packaging or doing something with tablets. I do feel like it is possible that sometimes, by the way, it's the right idea at the wrong time. And, sometimes it's like, hey, we tried that 10 years ago, it didn't work. Well, wait a second, if we try it again now, same thing, new environment, new mentality, new information set. I do believe that people are open to changing their minds, and so I wouldn't let the failure of the past prevent the experiment from being run again, you know?
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And if that Kingsford story I told you at the very beginning of our talk, yeah, that had been tried 5 years before, 10 years before, but they did it a different way, and they didn't figure out how to solubilize the sawdust because you have to heat it to get the sawdust to absorb the water. Well, one of the engineers, new engineer, same problem, but figured out how to do that, and all of a sudden we're able to create more natural wood content in the briquette than we ever could before, solving several different problems. So it was, yeah, I mean, you're right. Sometimes the idea, its time is not there. You put it on the shelf, but you got to come back to it because good ideas, there'll be a time for them at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rick, I know we're at time. I just want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast. I always love our conversations, and they always take a really interesting, productive, sometimes unproductive turn, and those are both great. And I'm glad we were able to record a little bit of this and share it with some audience and whoever cares to listen. So thank you.
Spencer, thank you so much for the invitation. I love talking with you. And, it was absolutely a thrill when we ran into each other accidentally in Chicago 6 months or something ago. I came off stage, I walk out the door, and I see this guy in a baseball hat. I'm like, remember that? Yeah, it was just a very happy coincidence.
It was a great coincidence, and you caught me in the heat of the moment. We were up next, about to present. I was with the two panelists on the panel I was moderating, Pierre Mitchell, who's a well-known analyst in our space, and Nico, one of our customers. And so we're doing like the last minutes, 30 minutes of prep quickly. We're about to be on stage, it's about to be live. And then I see you and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is worth, pausing this and saying hello. So that was really fun. So I mean, I'm sure I'll run into you as you can continue to do more of these conferences,
That sounds great. I'll look forward to it.